Week 5 featured some awesome games, a overtime game to cap off the night, and then a matchup, that I guess many people, we were talking before we went on air, did not expect to be as close as it was. And I say it with a smile because my team is involved in that one. But let's break down all the games from Week 5. The Week 5 post-game show. We have 2 weeks of the regular season left after this, so that's crazy. First of all, we'll kind of do some playoff things in a second, but I'm joined by Kyle, Matt, and Logan. Guys, thanks for joining me, and let's get right into that overtime game. The Werewolves escape, and they have now won 3 in a row. We were talking about it after, and they take down the Ozone Boys 72-65 in overtime, and the Ozone Boys had a shot to win it in regulation, and then it was just kind of all Werewolves in the overtime, and when they're that short, that's kind of how it goes. But we can go to Matt first on that one. We were talking about the atmosphere and kind of having to be there, and I know we just rub it right in Logan's face, who is many states away. But with that overtime game, 2 teams, and let me just give you some background. They played in the playoffs, and I didn't even pin myself. Hold on one second. Here we go. They played in the playoffs at least last year. If not, it seems like last season we had, the season before, but they had a really close 4-5 matchup at one point. And so they know each other. And another great game between the Werewolves and Ozone Boys. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like a game where they knew each other because right out the gate, they seemed to understand each other's game plans a little bit. I think the Werewolves understood exactly what the Ozone Boys were going to do. I thought that their defense was incredible in terms of swarming the ball and forcing tough shots. I mean, we saw Paul McGuire. He still got his 18. Luke Hogan was turning it up. But, I mean, they quieted some guys. And, I mean, 65 points from the Ozone Boys is a little more on the lower end. Last week they scored a little less, but 65, they usually get to that 70, 80 range. And then I think from the Werewolves, we just saw clutch play. And talking to Christian, he said the Werewolves are a team. They started 2-2, I think maybe even 0-2 or 1-1. And they were like, no, they've had some bad matchups. Just wait. They're one of these better teams. And I think they proved it. Brian Heston, he's my player of the week with a really clutch performance, 26 points. And I bet Kyle can attest to this as well. One of those games you just had to be there watching to understand how hype it was, all the noise in the gym, and to perform the way they did against a good young Ozone Boys team. I got to give them a lot of credit.
Yeah, it was certainly a very interesting game. We thought at one point margin was slowly getting bigger for the Werewolves, especially down in that fourth quarter. And then I got to give it to the Ozone Boys. They quickly turned around with a minute to go. They made a few smart substitutions in. They brought in ball hawks and people who were really aggressive on defense, and they got those turnovers, and they were able to send it in overtime. But it's those misses to start off overtime that really killed them, and the free throws from Dave Campbell that really made the lead what it was in overtime for the Werewolves.
Yeah, and so just to give you guys some background with that, so now both teams are 3-2, and now the Werewolves have that tiebreaker. So as we kind of start to preview some of these possible playoff matchups, this game may come back to be big if those teams finish with the same record. So again, both teams 3-2, and both teams have kind of taken different ways to get to 3-2. Let's touch on what we thought coming in would be the game of the week, and it was a good game, topped by that 9 p.m. game, I'd say for sure, as far as the dramatics go. But we'll stay right on court one, Duyer's Boys and Good U. And so it is the Duyer's Boys who, hold off, the Good U in a finals rematch that I know, Zach Tartaglia talked about after the game. But, 2 teams that, again, that had that playoff atmosphere as well. We can let Kyle jump in first with this one, but, Kutu and Volpe, again, 66 combined. Tartaglia, drops 22, and that's nearly all of the Duyer's Boys points. And that's enough to overcome some balanced scoring from Good U.
I don't know how Vincent Volpe and John Kutu do it though, but they find a way. Like I was convinced that they weren't able to pull this off because they were down by a decent amount going into the fourth quarter, and then something happened and everything changed. Vincent Volpe was getting everything going his way. Tartaglia was getting everything going his way. John Kutu, it was unbelievable. I mean, they're a fantastic pair to watch though.
Yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
All right, awesome. Yeah, so that was a really good game. Duyer's Boys sitting pretty 5-0, and I think this kind of put an idea in my head. We've talked in the past couple of post games and podcasts where can teams that get, I don't want to say carried, but teams that get heavily helped by 1 to 2 players, can they go all the way? And I think this kind of proves it. 8 people on the court, it's okay if only 2 of your guys are the main scorers. I mean, with Kutu, Volpe, and Tartaglia combining for, trying to do this quick math, 85, and they scored 90 points, only 5 points for the rest of the team. They're going to have the majority split of the points for the rest of the season. I think that's fine. They're consistently going to get you about 20 each, you would say. I think what impressed me with this team this week, though, is we all know them. They got Shane Patrick. They got guys that like to chirp, yell, passionate, energetic, things like that. Shane Patrick was ejected from this game. They had one substitution against, like you mentioned, Joey, a good U team where Matt St. Hours led the way with 31, but then it was spread 19, 13, 11. Like, they were moving the ball. They had legs. They had one sub. And I just thought it was really impressive how they mentally handled that game and then physically were able to finish that game and outscore them by basically double, 30-16 in the fourth quarter. And they were stopping Matt St. Hours had a fantastic game, by the way. Shout out to him. 31 points. It looked effortless. If they won, he would have been player of the week. But I was very intrigued with how they're a 4-0 team, yes, and now they're 5-0, but all the obstacles they overcame in this game to still win.
Yeah, and they improved to 5-0 like you talked about, and that
this game was this was a 2-point game with 5 minutes left. Like crazy. This was crazy. Like
yeah, and it's definitely a finals preview, and we're gonna get to a team that earned their first win this week, but the Good U joins the Ozone Boys at 3-2. So now there's 5 teams with 3 wins. And so now we start to see how these teams are going to shake out and how those tiebreakers fall into place. Speaking of a team getting their first win, we talked about an undefeated team. We had 2 teams that were winless coming in, and it is Ball Don't Lie getting the win over the Mambas 78-69 to earn that first win. And Grant Rosenberg, we talk a lot about, we try to touch on all the teams, and I kind of want to go to Logan on this. I mean, Grant Rosenberg has been, a consistent 20 to 30 points. Sure, sometimes his team ends up finding themselves down a lot, and, do those stats count? Do they not? That's not for me to, debate necessarily. But this game, he showed up and led the way with 26, Ellis Einhorn with 22. But Logan, Grant has been consistent for this team and was a huge reason why they were able to get their first win.
I 100% agree. It seems like Grant is always in highlights. It seems like Grant is always the lead man for this team. He's always leading the way. He does a fantastic job of getting his team in position to create buckets or even just score, whether it's him or his teammates. Now, I do want to shout out the Mambas. I think the Mambas are so much better of a team than they're actually showing, especially on the record side. Lawrence and John both fantastic today or last night, 26 points apiece. And they almost both had double doubles as well. So like the Mambas are gonna be something to watch. I think they could win a playoff game, but it just depends on who they match up with.
Yeah, and so as we get to that, the playoff situation, and I just completely closed out of the tab. Mambas are going to be the 12th seed, and so the top 4 teams will get a bye. So that's how this is going to roll. So you start looking at the standings, and these standings, again, on the website are not, with the tiebreakers. So just because Good U is 3 and they have the same record as the Werewolves doesn't mean they would be the 3 seed, but it's in order by record type of deal. And the tiebreakers would be head-to-head, and then it would be RPI. So we do some math. We take into account strength of schedule if 2 teams are tied and they didn't play, and we got a whole math equation going on. So that gets messy. But for easy talking, it's going to be 5-12, 6-11, talk about those March Madness matchups, right? 5-12, 6-11, 7-10, and that would be what we call our first round. And so it'd be a team like the Warriors, a team like the Werewolves, a team like the Orcas getting the Mambas or Ball Don't Lie in that first game, and that kind of can pose some problems for them. The lone team right now, I'm going to shift gears really quick. The lone team right now that is 4-1, Lob City improved to 4-1. After only scoring 20 points after halftime, and it was a low-scoring game anyway, 68-60. But, I was very involved in this game, but felt like they went long stretches in that second quarter without scoring, letting the halfway crooks come back. And And Matt, you were talking about this before, like you guys kept it close. And I was like, yeah, that's what happens when a team, for what it feels like, doesn't score for minutes and minutes. And normally it's the Crooks that can't score. And this time it was Lob City. But, what'd you see in that game, between the Halfway Crooks and Lob City?
Yeah, honestly, I thought Lob City maybe just came out the gate. I don't want to they didn't look enthused. They didn't look like they were in the game mentally at all. I mean, they still had a good first half, obviously 48 points, but Halfway Crooks outscored them in the third and fourth quarter, what I'm now looking at. But I mean, Lob City, they're a solid team. You got to think, they're a good team. You got to think that in those close games, eventually they're going to be like, all right, let's figure out, let's just get this win, let's get some buckets, get some stops. But the Halfway Crooks, Joey, I got to say, you guys, I think what was so impressive by you guys was your chemistry. I felt like everyone on the bench was talking. You were very much believed that a comeback could be possible at a point where the lead for Lob City was pretty big. I mean, it was 48-32 at halftime, and you guys managed to cut. I think it was tied. It was tied at one point, or within.
It was tied it was tied at 60 in the fourth quarter
with 4.5 to go. Yeah.
Yeah. So and for Halfway Crooks, you guys already have like a little bit of a worse record. You're down by 16. You might be like, this one's a crapshoot. But I gotta say, you guys mentally came back pretty strong in that second half. So honestly, I thought you guys just really fought and rose to the level of your competition for sure.
Yeah, Kyle, go ahead. Speaking of it being tied with 4.5 to go, yeah.
In the beginning, Lob City looked like they were playing the normal game, but I think because they kind of slept on you guys a little bit. I think once they got to that first end of the first quarter going into the second quarter, they had a double-digit lead. They thought you guys weren't really going to put up much of a fight, and I think they kind of just slowed down. I think they really weren't as involved. They thought they had the win in the bag, and that's what gave you guys the opportunity to come back. And you guys did come back, but unfortunately, they just flipped the switch again, turned it right back on, and they went on an 8-0 run to close out the game.
Yeah, and I know we'll talk a lot more about Lob City, currently standing in that 2 seed, and so they would get a bye, and that's kind of what that win is big for them. You don't have to worry about tiebreakers if you have more wins than the teams below you in the standings. It makes it very easy. Let's get to Logan here on that last game on Core 3, the Warriors and Stampede, and Warriors, up. I guess it's looking like down 1 at halftime. I know we have all the stats there in that first quarter, but that's okay. Down 1 at halftime, and then really turned it on in that second half. 36-13. But Logan, what'd you see from those highlights as far as how the Warriors were able to pull away?
I just saw a lot of deflation from Stampede. It just seemed like they were unenthused. They weren't trying on defense. They weren't hustling the ball. While on the other hand, the Rhode Island Warriors were just taking advantage of everything that they made. They were keeping each other in the game. They out-rebounded the Stampede 47-29, and that's insane. So, you can't really expect rebounds to be something that wins games, but it does help a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and shout out Kevin Figueredo, who consistently, from what I've seen, is putting up double-doubles for this Rhode Island Warriors team. 32 last night, 15 rebounds, 8 of them offensive. That's a huge, huge part. Those are second chances, right? 8 offensive rebounds. We don't know necessarily how many points that led to, but it's going to lead to good things if you're getting offensive rebounds and controlling that area of the floor. Only 5 games. We had the Orcas getting a win over Sin City, who was unable to show up. So the Orcas also at 3-2. I'm going to put you guys on the spot. Pull up those standings really quick. Let's assume the top 4 teams get a bye, so you can kind of count out. Let's just count out Duyer's Boys and Lob City for this conversation. But between the other teams, what matchup would you most like to see in the first round? So we're talking teams 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And the 5 would play the 12, the 6 would play the 11, like we talked about. So you kind of want to look at that middle area. But what matchup between 2 teams are you hoping happens in the first round? Does anybody have one?
I would like
all
to.
All right, Kyle first. Go ahead. Yeah.
That 8-9 matchup's pretty interesting. especially because they're two and three teams.
You're talking Sin City and Stampede, right?
Yeah.
That may stay like that. It may not. But yeah, so what matchup? You can mishmash teams here. You could be like Ozone Boys, Stampede. You can what matchup do you most want to see?
I want to see the Mambas I want to see a Mambas win. I think their best opportunities to do against the Orcas, because the Orcas,
right.
for some reason, they just have trouble shooting most of the time.
Yeah.
And it depends on their big men and on their defense, though. But here's the thing, though. The reason why the Mambas lost the game this week is because they had 4 players. They're playing the entire 40 minutes.
Right.
I truly think if they had their full squad there, 8 players, 4 was getting rest and 4 were out there, and they just kept switching like they usually do, I'm pretty confident they would have won against Ball Don't Lie, because they only lost by 9.
Right.
So
Right.
I want to see the Mamas get their first win. It would be awesome if they could do it in the playoffs. I think Orcas will lose to them.
This is how you get called out again.
Yeah.
By the Orcas next week. Just putting it out there. This is the blueprint for a post-game interview call out about Kyle by the Orcas. That's okay.
I also got to apologize to the RA Warriors. I chose the Stampede. I'm sorry, RA Warriors. You guys really did shut me up.
There you go. Logan, do you have a matchup, whether it exists right now or not? What 2 teams would you most want to see?
So you just count out Lob City and Dujay's boys?
Yeah. So really any other,
Okay.
any other 2 teams kind of work for me.
I would really enjoy seeing a Warriors and Ball Don't Lie playoff
There you go.
game. I feel like that game would go to the Warriors, but I feel like it would just be an absolute fireworks of a show. The Warriors would be always defensive.
Yeah.
And Ball Don't Lie is starting to really figure it out, I feel like, and they're starting to improve each week. So by the time playoffs comes around, I feel like this would be an absolute barn burner.
Matt, who you got?
If they somehow don't get, if both these teams don't get a bye, I would love to see a Werewolves Ozone Boys rematch,
There you go.
just because of how awesome that game was last night. But a more realistic matchup that I would like to see, I like to see the Orcas versus your team, the Halfway Crooks.
Again.
It'd
It'd be a good game. I'm
I
telling
think
you.
that'd be a pretty interesting matchup, because I was heavy on the Orcas start of the season. They've been starting to dip a little bit, and then I saw something in your Crooks, Joey. I saw a little spark, and
that time of year.
if they get a matchup with the Orcas, I mean, we'll see what happens.
Let me just say it with a smile, and you guys are all new. It's around this time of year, week 5, 6, 7. Normally we play 9 regular season weeks or 8. I would hate to see the Halfway Crooks in the first round of the playoffs. Let me just put that out there. That would be not a fun matchup for a lot of teams, is the way things are going right now. But guys, very good job.
Say that.
I can say whatever I want. It's my show.
That's
I can
fair.
literally say
He's the
whatever I want.
commish.
But no, I do. It's funny. I say that every time. I say I would hate to see the Halfway Crooks in the playoffs. To put it that way. I mean, but seriously, as a 1-4 team, and there's other teams with records like that too. I think Sin City, when they have their team at 2-3, I think is a little better than maybe 2 wins right now. And so it's all about matchups, and it's all about who you get in that first round. But we'll continue to preview the playoffs, guys. Thank you very much. Good job. We'll see you guys back.
I just need someone to beat the Dugay boys. I'm sick of them calling me out on Twitter. I'm sick of it. Come on, I need someone to step up and beat them.
That we'll end on that. Yeah, we'll end on that. Good stuff. Thanks, guys.